Okay, let's start my talk. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Kobe, to organize that, and that's really awesome. My theme of talk is NativeScript Vue and mobile stuff, how it is going, how it is working. Let me first describe the mobile stuff, how we could implement the application in the mobile and how it is going, what is the advantages and disadvantages. Then I'll dive to the JavaScript on the mobile and to the NativeScript, and then we will talk about how to connect Vue.js with NativeScript. Let me first to describe myself. I'm Vlad Smirnov from Russia. My first full name is Vladimir, as our Russian president Vladimir Putin, but he doesn't know about NativeScript at all. Okay, I'm working in the rightbalance as a director of engineering in Russia, and we are the company which is made a consultancy for other companies, and we try to move the solutions of companies to the new level, to make it more scalable, more stable, and to make it more valuable. Let's start the talk. Let's talk about the mobile stuff, how we could write applications on the mobile. First of all, we could write applications on fully native languages for mobile stuff, but I see that there is some hacky things, because we have two platforms that is grab the most amount of market. This is iOS and Android, and for developing the application, which is should be similar on both platforms, it is a tricky thing, because we need to have two developers with two different experience on different languages. For iOS, we need to use Swift and Objective-C, but for Android, we need to use Java or Kotlin. I know. The other option to write applications for the mobile is to use WebView. To make a markup website and wrap it in the web view, and that's it. We have the JavaScript code, we have the one code base, but there is the disadvantage that WebView is a bit slower than native code, and it is restricted by using some bare metal API. Then the other thing that we have in the world is to use JavaScript frameworks. I know two JavaScript frameworks is the most important in the world is React Native and NativeScript. This is a cool. Let's give me the overview. What is the pros of using JavaScript frameworks on the mobile first? There is one language for both platforms, which is cool, because we need to use only one developer for both platforms, and it would have the one code base for both platforms too. Then JavaScript framework has its predefined components, which is compiled directly to the native code, and it would be faster than using WebView on the mobile. But except the pros, there is some cons to use JavaScript on the mobile, which is JavaScript code in business logic is mostly launches on the JavaScript VM on the mobile. That moves us to the no full device control resources, because JavaScript frameworks uses native components, and there is some API restrictions. You don't have full control of the device. If you would like to have it, you could write the plugin. Let's skip the questions at the end. You need to write the plugins for the framework and to link it somehow. Then on the mobile stuff, we don't have any regular DOM. I'm talking about the div, B's, or A components on the DOM. There is only virtual DOM. In that case, JavaScript frameworks has its components and mobile layouts, not regular. There is CSS, but there is no regular behavior that we have a habit to use. Let's have a talk about React Native and NativeScript and compare it a bit. What is the React Native? React Native, as you see in the name, it's mostly for React infrastructure. You can't integrate some framework that, for example, you don't want to use React, but there is React Native, you want to use some other framework, and it is a really tricky thing to integrate some other framework here. The other form that React Native in the repository need to contain the full projects of each mobile stuff. For iOS and Android, they have the full application, and you need to place it in Git because React Native has its tools that integrate the written code to the platform specific, and it generates a bundle, the build that moves to the App Store or maybe Google Store. And as I said, there is native components that compile to the native language, and it becomes it makes the application a bit faster than the using web view here. And what is the NativeScript and how it is different from the React Native stuff? There is a possibility for using different frameworks because NativeScript is written on the plain JavaScript, and now I know two frameworks that are supported by NativeScript is Angular and Vue.JS. This is really cool because you have your own experienced framework and use it inside here. Then, what about mobile configs? I mean that React Native contains the whole code of mobile stuff in different folders, of course, but NativeScript contains only necessary files. I mean that it contains only config files, IDs, images, icons, splash screens. And when you compile it, it generates a platform folder where is subfolders iOS and Android, and there you could find the whole code of the platform. And from there you could launch the code through Xcode or Android Studio. And what else? NativeScript also has its own native predefined components, but it is slightly different from React Native components. The behavior might be different and configuration, but they both achieve the same goal. Moreover, NativeScript has a webpack, and it makes it possible to integrate everything through webpack, like TypeScript, CSS preprocessors like Sass, Stylus, and other stuff, and of course using the frameworks that we have talked about. Let's talk about the Vue in NativeScript. Vue in the second version starts to support virtual DOM. In that case, it makes possible to integrate Vue to NativeScript because mobile stuff doesn't have its own DOM, regular DOM, but it manipulates through virtual DOM. And through virtual DOM, it makes it possible to compile the components into the native components for the mobile. Then Vue.js library is very lightweight. Sorry, lightweight. In that case, it decreases the bundle a bit and makes the application a bit light. And it's also possible. It's also important for the web too. And NativeScript Vue makes the awesome code sharing potential between web and NativeScript Vue. You could share some code that you wrote for the web and share it with the NativeScript Vue, and that's cool. Nobody wants to write twice the same code in the project. Let's discuss a bit what is the difference between integration the Vue.js web and NativeScript Vue. There is three different things. The first one is importing the library. When you are on the web, you import the Vue from the Vue library. And if you are on NativeScript, you need to import Vue from NativeScript Vue. It's the same. It's a different library for NativeScript. And then the bootstrapping the app. As I said, there is no regular DOM, but on the web you need to integrate the whole application to its own. For some component on the web page in the DOM, and you set the selector to the EL property of the Vue initialization, and it is not necessary for NativeScript because there is no DOM. And the third thing is a template. For web, you could use any library that is using with DOM, for example, Vuetify. But for NativeScript, it's impossible, and you need to use the mobile layouts, which is predefined in NativeScript and the NativeScript Vue. And what about the store? This is a really interesting thing because if you have a big store using Vuex on the web, you could share it with the mobile front through NativeScript Vue. Because this is the same library, this is the business logic, it doesn't use DOM, and that could be shared. But other thing, for example, if we could to share the stuff between sessions on web and on mobile, you need to use something else. For example, for web it is using local storage, but for mobile I found a library like NativeScript Secure Storage. This is secure storage on the mobile that's prohibited by Apple on the mobile and by Android, and that's super cool. And for summarizing all that stuff, we could see that JavaScript with NativeScript Vue.JS has a similar syntax between mobile and web. Then you could reuse logic, which is super cool because you don't need to have different repositories. You could share the code and decrease the bunch amount of time for development. Then there is the same component lifecycle on the web and on the NativeScript Vue. And the third one that is something like disappointing thing is that templates are different. But it shouldn't be the deal to write different templates with the sharing code for different platforms. For different platforms, I mean that web and two platforms for mobile, iOS and Android. That's super cool. And here you could find the code, the simple component on the NativeScript Vue, where you could find the template using the grid layout, the layout of the mobile. Some bunch of JavaScript code, which is also component. You could find that lifecycle is the same because I use the mounted function here, and some styling using stylus here. You could notice that I'm using Vue property decorator here, except the NativeScript Vue library. In case this import could be used on both on the web and the mobile too, and it makes possible to use the ES6 classes to use in the code. That's cool. Thanks for listening. Here is my contacts. If you have some questions, please ask me. And if you take some question after the talk and after the meetup, you could contact me through LinkedIn and ask it there.
I'm sure we have a bunch of questions. I have a bunch myself. I want to go first. I'm going to jump in with specific questions.
I would love to just see some of the template codes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any more of that to show.
Huh?
Just how different they would be.
Or the compare and contrast slide, maybe, if you could walk us through it.
Yeah.
One sec.
Yeah, right. If you just walk us through step by step those lines, because that's, I just think this is where it makes it beautiful, right? Like if you can.
see that one on the right.
Is there any way to zoom?
This is properties. There's properties for, you mean that stuff, right?
Yeah, just trying to see how different it is. You mentioned that it's not exactly the same, so I kind of wanted to see how different
There is components that's really different. Stack layout, this is a predefined component that is layout of the mobile front mostly. But
and is that predefined component that you wrote, or is that part of NativeScript?
It is part of NativeScript Vue.
Got it.
So that's the part I wanted to make sure was clear, because I've seen this before, but I just, yeah, so if you go to like you want to use NativeScript, there's basically like a bunch of pre-built components, right?
Yes.
And so like what we're looking at here, you know, they don't have divs, right? That's web specific. But if you want to look at NativeScript, there's basically like a list of all the different components you can use. You just have to use those exact components because they compile down to the iOS or Android versions. They're pre-built down. So the premise of like, what's stack layout? Is that just like the main page container or whatever that, I don't know, I'm asking you. Like that's what,
yeah, there is different layouts. There is a flex layout, stack layout, grid layout, and other bunch of components that you could use that is used on the mobile. And when you use that components, it is compiled to the native components on each platform, on iOS and Android. That's the main difference. And in that case, you can't use Vuetify for NativeScript Vue.
Yeah.
Because there is no rebuild DOM.
Yeah.
Can you make your own components for it?
Yes, you could, but making the new component, you need to use the component that is predefined. You could write your own component and use it in other components, that's okay. But in case that there is no regular DOM, for writing your component, you need to use a bunch of components that is defined in NativeScript Vue.
Has anyone tried to write a library that essentially uses the names of the NativeScript layout components like stack layout, but writes it in HTML so that you can just import it and really just use the same templates? So I can import stack layout and it can, for the web, import a div, and for NativeScript.
I think that it's important to note that there's no magic here. So all that thing is, it's just a wrapper around native API. So you have, I don't know, the stack layout, it wraps two classes. One of them is UI stack view probably in iOS, and there's a similar one on Android. And all these properties just hook directly into those properties into those native classes. That's all that thing really is.
This is the main thing.
So, and another thing is that mobile and web are two very different platforms. So, therefore, you can, whatever makes sense in the mobile device, that just does not make sense at all on the web. There is some common middle ground for that library can be written, but that will cover, I would say, very thin layer of overlap between the two. So that's why those things are different. So you gotta understand mobile a little bit. Like you don't have to be an expert in mobile, but you need to at least understand like
You have to be
how
the
mobile
JavaScript
layout works.
experience. That's it. You read the documentation of the predefined components, the properties that it could support, and manipulate with that on the mobile.
One thing I want to point out is that I pretty much feel that the documentation of NativeScript Vue is almost at the level of Vue itself, which is
pretty high bar. That's pretty high bar.
I'm assuming NativeScript does a good job of bringing in all of the like APIing with the phone for like gyros and location data and all that kind of stuff.
There is a lot of third-party libraries that support too. For example, we are using Google API for manipulating via geolocation and other stuff. There is a library geolocation. It's called the same, I suppose. That I used in my project that tracked your geolocation on the mobile.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that under the under the ground maybe it's compiled. There is the name of the component and compiled it on both platforms and use the same API and provide information if there is from the hardware to the front layer, and you could manipulate your logic here.
And if you don't have whatever you need, let's say Apple tomorrow releases, I don't know, projector that comes out of a phone or something crazy, you can write it. You can fall back and write the a native extension on like Swift and Kotlin, and then connect it over to the JavaScript.
But you need to be an expert in Swift and Kotlin.
Yeah. So
I mean, you don't have to be an expert. You just got to know those things.
I get it. Yeah, but you can like Touch ID is that. Is there a NativeScript way to?
We could Google it. I suppose that there is a library for NativeScript Vue for using Touch ID and Face ID. They have the same API, I suppose, on the Android and iOS, and provide the same information out from the hardware. If there is some difference, you will get both of them, or maybe there would be the wrapper that provides that information in the similar format.
Got it.
My question is,
Yeah, go ahead.
how do you manage the resources? And you were talking about resources. What do you mean by resources? My resources, when I'm saying resources, I mean like camera, for example. Do you have access in NativeScript?
Yes, yes, there is, as I said, a third-party library that you could use that makes possible to use camera. For example, you have
But
a button.
Are you using browser, kind of?
This is not browser.
Yeah.
This is predefined components.
Okay,
for
so
example, you could write the button, click on that, and make the action to show the component, the predefined component, which is working with the camera.
Okay.
In the same class, for example, right? And there is a camera, there is a providing the video from or photo from the camera to the device screen. And when the photo or video is coming, or maybe you tap something, that component provides you information about what was done by user, and you will work with that information somehow. I know, maybe wrap it some or crop it, some other stuff that would be your logic.
Thank you. So back to my question, when you were saying the problem comes out about resources, what's the negative side of? Because you were mentioning something about resources.
We have that word for different things. For example, resources could be images or maybe audios, files, and resources it could be, as you said, for example, camera or geolocation stuff. If we are talking about resources as an image or I don't know, maybe video or something like that, you store it in the asset folder, and the Webpack will take it from there, compile all paths that you use in your application by some regex, I suppose, and then put it in the bundle, and you'll get it in the application. If we are talking about resources that you said, like camera and some environment of the mobile, you could use different things that is predefined, or maybe you could find third-party library. Look, NativeScript is a great application. There is a bunch of written things, but Vue.js, NativeScript Vue is not so long time started. But in NativeScript Vue, you could use NativeScript components. You could reuse it.
So what is Vue NativeScript?
Look, there is a project NativeScript Vue in the web where takes the NativeScript as a core and wrap it with the Vue and added the Vue components that is using the NativeScript components. This is the thing. And look, for example, JavaScript. What is JavaScript Vue? This is the Vue that wraps the JavaScript functions, and you use it as a framework. This is the same thing. There is a NativeScript, and the Vue as a framework that you are using with the NativeScript.